Hi, everyone. My name is JR. Welcome to our first podcast of Explore. And we're going to be exploring a whole bunch of different topics in West Virginia. And today I have a special guest with me, my brother.
Guest. Wow.
Special, I know. You're special.
I've been told that by my teachers.
But what we're going to talk about today is the supply chain, some of the issues that we have had. Christmas is past, and I hope everyone had a great Christmas and is going to have a great New Year. But I want to explore what were some of the problems with our packages over Christmas in the U.S.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research on this. So first off, I'm not a genius.
Yeah, we should say your credentials, though. You're in.
I work for a top 100 importing company in the U.S. And we were affected by it, and a lot of companies have been affected, from whether it's appliances, were affected because they couldn't get a specific electronic part, some car issues and automobiles. So to kind of talk about how it happened going back to Q1 of 2020 was when the pandemic hit.
And quarter one for all of us layman people.
Sorry. January, February, March of 2020. So what happened is when economists and companies, when the pandemic hit, the assumption was the government, which they did, was going to shut down the economy to help choke out the pandemic. And so a lot of them went back to the playbooks of 2008 with the Great Recession and said, okay, we're going to have some issues with consumers needing materials, consumers buying. And so they started to plan for that happening. So they immediately felt there was going to be a big pullback in the economy. At the same time, you had China in Wuhan and surrounding areas. They immediately quarantined about 50 million people. Flights were canceled, shipping vessels were canceled, factories were canceled in China. And the reason I'm saying China is because China accounts for about 20 to 22% of our imports, which is shy of $600 billion. And that's
just a small number.
That's a big number, right? and the size of Walmart, I'm not saying Walmart only does China importing, but Walmart's about a $600 billion company. That shows you the amount of stuff we import. So companies, shipping companies, freight companies, they started cutting capacities. American companies doing business in China started to cut orders. So everyone looked back to what happened in 2008, 2009 with the housing boom. And they started to kind of adjust how they were going to handle this. The end of the day, those were all mistakes because every challenge or every, whatever you want to call the pandemic, whenever these things hit, they're very different. Yeah. So when this hit, what happened was we were all stuck at home.
Yeah.
And the unemployment rate rose, obviously, but it wasn't drastic. It did rise, but we were all stuck at home. So that meant we weren't going to the movie for popcorns. We weren't going to the local deli for lunch. So there were some businesses that were immediately influenced, but life didn't stop. So what happened in the world is we started to outfit our homes and offices because a lot of people I think Wes, who works at the power plant, he has a home. He's doing his work from home, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if Wes made a home office. I'm not saying you did, Wes, but people started building offices in their homes. People started to figure out how do we entertain our kids who are now stuck at home. So they started buying a lot of electronics. How do we make our basements and attics into gyms, which I did not, obviously. I didn't set up a gym, but people started buying exercising equipment.
We had all this extra time to look at our house and be like, oh, wow, this needs fixed, or I need to do this to continue in the job I'm at.
We were at home a lot.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I don't know, Peloton, have you heard of that? It's a exercise system. They were on major back order. So a lot of these products, because life did not stop, a lot of these products were imported from China. So that's your first issue. You had a big strain baking equipment. So we our habits started to change to buy different things we needed at home during the pandemic. And at the end of the day, we found out, oh, wait a minute, there's not enough containers to get this stuff from China to the States, right?
Yeah.
Not enough containers.
And what helped all this also be able to afford all this was the stimulus money being pumped in. So now you're not spending as much. You're getting child tax credit. You're getting stimulus money. You have all this money to spend.
So it can come down to, there weren't enough shipping containers in Shanghai to send materials to Long Beach, Long Island, Long Beach, Los Angeles, in California. And so they started to say, okay, why weren't there? So when the pandemic hit in 2020, PPE was a major need, right? We need face masks. Surgeons need surgical masks. We need gowns. I mean, there's a lot of PPE, and I think you probably remember that. And this is a political statement. It's just a fact. They said that we did not stockpile enough PPE items. I don't know who did it, but we didn't have the stockpile. So a lot of that stuff comes from China to the States. So where China started to export lots of PPE items, these containers started to go to different parts of the world, because normally when you think about exporting to the countries, you're talking about your wealthy countries. You're talking about North America, Europe, and they started sending PPE items to Africa, South Asia, Latin America, places where they don't export as much too. So you had all these containers of PPE items going to places that don't send containers back to China because there's just not regular runs back. So we started to run into an issue of not enough containers to ship the material to the States. And just to give you an idea, a freight liner, a cargo ship, they can transport about 20 to 24,000 20-foot containers on a ship. A 20-foot container fits about 2 cars if you're shipping cars, or it can ship about 1 to 2 aisles of groceries for a grocery store. So that gives you an idea how much.
And you're talking 24,000 of those on a ship.
On a ship. Yeah. And so Shanghai was not getting their shipping containers back. So this caused major delays in getting the stuff to America. Talking about just the States, getting the stuff here, and a big model, and the backlog created a big model that companies use in manufacturing is JIT inventory. So that's a big part of how we manufacture products. And when you put hey, your containers aren't going to come for 2-3 months, it really hurt manufacturing.
Yeah. And so for those that don't know, JIT is JIT, which stands for just in time.
That's my only claim to fame.
Yeah, everything that we have gotten and we have ordered gets there just in time.
Correct.
Not ahead, not behind, just in time.
Yeah, and the reason why that happens is the goal is to have the minimum amount of inventory needed to produce, let's say a paint. I have to have all these different chemicals to make paint. I'm not in the paint business, but if one of these chemicals doesn't come, I can't make my paint. And so it happened with the appliance industry. There was a specific electronic part that didn't come for stoves and fridges and microwaves and stuff. And so when that's manufactured, what are you going to do? And so JIT inventory, just-in-time inventory, is very good for shareholders and companies who want to, instead of having warehouses like Ford, instead of having a warehouse of transmission parts, you're just going to have that come in last minute. So there's a cost to warehousing. And when you talk about shareholders, which are owners of these companies, they are wanting that money not to be spent in inventory sitting there. They're wanting that to be spent on whether it's, let me see, how do I describe it? Whether it is money that's paid to executives and bonuses or dividends, they would rather that money back to them in that form than sitting in a warehouse. So that's how JIT inventory, really kind of bit us in the butt. And that's been something we've used for 60, 70 years in the States for manufacturing. So
yeah, I guess the way I would kind of look at it is the reason your online sales are doing so well is because you don't have to have a storefront now, which is extra cost, which is kind of having
Correct.
A warehouse with all this stuff just sitting in there.
Well, so if you want to talk about how it affects prices, talking about cost, so I'll talk about 2 different things about pricing. I mean, JIT inventory does affect that some, and American consumers love inexpensive products. I don't see cheap products, inexpensive. And so whether we complain about importing from China or whatnot, we're in a disposable income society. I have an air fryer. If it dies tomorrow, I'm going to throw it away and get a new air fryer for $40. I don't know what they cost now. I'm guessing.
Whereas we used to have an air fryer that cost $400 and lasted for 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, the fridge, it's funny, in Sandy, what understands from Sandy Appliances, the old fridge, it would outlive all of us.
Yeah.
And now I have a fridge that went at the house in 12 months. It's like, so it's just a different world that we live in. So there's two things that affected pricing. Number one, these containers I'm talking about. Normally the cost, so if I'm going to ship from Shanghai, China to, let's say Miami or Savannah, Georgia or whatnot, I have to rent that container. And the renting of those containers costs maybe $2,000, $1,200, $2,500. Now, and this happened in probably Q2 of this year, which would be 2021. Now those containers cost $20,000 to $25,000. So it was a tenfold price increase, right?
Yeah.
And so if you import 100 containers a day, guess what that costs?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, corporations don't sit, and shareholders aren't like, wow, let's just take less profit. No, that all gets passed.
I hear that
on.
being said by certain members of the government when they say, what? The companies aren't going to eat this cost? They're going to pass it on?
Yeah, now, it's not to say that some companies don't. I don't want to make a broad stroke. But any company that I've ever worked with, including those companies that I'm on the board of, we aren't going to take a $60 million loss, FYI. Yeah. We're not going to do that. So you talk about trickle-down economics, those price increases trickle down, and they always get passed through. So that's one of the expenses, and that's globally. Even domestically, let's say you're a U.S. manufacturer and you don't import, and let's say you make stuff here. Domestic freight is changed drastically. And the reason that's changed drastically is, number one, there's a lack of drivers. Yeah. And the reason being is our grandfather was a truck driver. Very proud. He drove for 50 years.
Yes, forever.
And nowadays, unfortunately, parents aren't telling their kids, hey, you should be a truck driver. It's kind of looked down upon, which is very sad.
You have to go to college. You have to go in debt. You have to get a minimal job.
That's kind of the trend now, right? Yeah. And we can talk differently about trade schools, which I'm totally for, and totally think that it's a part we're missing in our society. But so now we have less truck drivers, which is a very vital part of U.S. Distribution and transportation. So if we're going to take, let's say these containers we're talking about, if they come into port in Savannah, Georgia, we need that container in Chicago, Illinois. We have to pay a truck line to drive it, or we put it on a train, a rail, put it on the rail. So you can do either ways, but there's less and less truck drivers. So that's a big change. Another change, and you brought it up, e-commerce sales are at a height. So Amazon is not the largest retailer yet. They're the second largest retailer behind Walmart. Amazon does a little shy of $400 billion in sales, I'm sorry. And interestingly enough, during COVID, companies like Walmart, Target, Home Depot, who really started to put more of an e-commerce section to their business, which is very large, it changes the whole distribution and the whole freight. So you mentioned it earlier. So Walmart and Moorfield, right? They bring in containers, come in and out of Walmart, and they unload the containers in the store. And we as consumers drive to the store to pick up anywhere from a bag of chips to a pair of jeans to
TVs,
anything, right?
Yeah.
But we go and we get it. So we're the transportation. We're the freight company. Now with e-commerce, and I'll just use Amazon because I'm a big Amazon user. I don't know if that's good or bad if I say it, but I am a big Amazon user.
Y'all are out there saying, "Oh, my wife, she should."
Well, listen, they're doing 400 billion. So I'm not. It's like McDonald's. Everyone makes fun of me for going to McDonald's. They sell 1 million hamburgers a day, so I'm not the only one getting a hamburger.
Yeah. You know who you are.
Yeah. So now you have this big increase from these companies doing e-commerce, and the reason why they increased is the older generation who stayed away from e-commerce. Now there was a lot of fear around COVID. People were dying. We didn't know. It was more of a fear of what's going on. We just didn't know. The information wasn't consistent. That people that the older generation started using apps in their computers to order stuff on Amazon. And in larger cities, there's a company called Peapod, which delivers all your groceries to you. And I actually think that there's stuff around here that you may be able to. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of place, but
I know that they do curbside delivery. I don't know if they deliver
to your home.
To your home.
Yeah. So in larger metros, when it hit, I was living in Chicago, and our neighbor, every 2-3 days, the Peapod truck would show up and take the groceries, put them on her doorstep. And I asked her, I said, "Are you guys doing all your groceries?" She's like, "Yeah, it's great." So that started to increase because of the pandemic. So you have all this stuff coming together. You have less drivers, you have container prices going up, and now transportation costs, because instead of us going to Walmart and Moorfield and buying onesie twosies, now Amazon is delivering to our house onesie twosies. The freight that they use just on Amazon alone is massive. It's why they have Amazon Prime, and you can spend the money to get free freight, right?
Well, it's also why Amazon has started to use their own trucks to deliver. Mm-hmm. It's like we can can cut out the other businesses and just do it ourselves.
And in some areas, when I lived in Chicago, I could put an order in on Amazon, and I could literally get that at my house in 3-4 hours, because they have, instead of Walmart having a store, they have distribution centers, and it's the same as a store concept, but they have shelving, hold lots of different SKUs, and it leaves and goes straight to your house, and so it puts a strain on the transportation side. But yeah, they are doing it, because one thing that Amazon did, which is off subject, but they understood the last, I think they call it the last 10 feet or whatnot, the last mile, getting that product to you quickly. So, but that increased because you had a new generation who like to go to Shop and Save. I like to go to Shop and Save still, who like to go to Walmart or Ace or wherever it may be around town. They would go to those places. Now they're being more cautious. So that influences cost, because now everything, as we said earlier, there's a trickle-down effect. So cost increases in freight are going to trickle down to the cost of product.
So here's the question that I'm sure everyone wants to know.
You're asking me.
Yeah. How long is it going to stay?
Well, a lot of people were, and this is all guess. A lot of people said, well, after Christmas, because it's such a big holiday season.
Big rush. Everyone's fine.
which happens around the holidays. Some people said, well, once I think Biden announced that the ports in LA were going to be open up 24/7. Well, the ports are going to be open up longer, in which these are things that help. I don't know if it's going to change quickly. I don't feel optimistic that in this economy and in what we're working with, it's going to go away in a quarter. I think through 2022, we're going to see it. We're going to see an increase in prices outside of inflation. The cost of freight is inflation, right? And so I think you'll continue to see it. I don't think it'll go away. I think it's going to be kind of a new norm, because as new people start using e-commerce, in Home Depot, I think there was a study I was reading, and all this, I read this all online. So this isn't, I'm sitting in my basement. So, when I read articles, Amazon sold like 100 million hammers. And Home Depot was like, why did Amazon,
Yeah, Home Depot, that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, so they're getting into, and they've been getting into for the last 5 years, heavier e-commerce. So you're going to see e-commerce continue. You may see some companies, it depends if shareholders have an appetite for, hey, maybe we need a warehouse of chemicals instead of just-in-time inventory. I don't know if that's going to go away. I mean, these are me guessing. I think some companies may say, hey, we need to have monies put into a warehouse of products so we can make the bicycle, or, we can have all the items. That may change, but I think time's going to tell. But I don't think this is going to stop and get better. I mean, and I wasn't as involved then, but look at the different types of national. I mean, we're such a global economy. Look at the different types of things that happen nationally, where we had in Japan, let's say the tsunami, which wasn't Japan, but there was one there. But the tsunami, well, what do we do, because now we can't export? And so those didn't really change how we went to market globally. It improved with time. Now there's so many different factors, and we're such a large global economy. I think it may be just the new norm. And I'm guessing, obviously. I'm not the head of the Fed.
And you still do have the government pumping large sums of money into the economy. And I went to major in economics, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Stare.
Is that Dr. Tony?
Yeah. But one of the things that we learned was, and to simplify it, if you have 10 items that are $1 each, and you have 10 people that are willing to pay $1 for each item, then the 10 and the 10 equals out. So you're not cut back on your product. But if now the 10 people have $10 and there's still only 10 items, they have to either increase production, which we're having a hard time doing because we can't get workers, or they have to raise the price. So that now that I have $10 and the next person has $10, that thing that was $1 is now $10.
You talking about supply and demand? Is that what you're talking about?
It's supply and demand, but it's inflation, because inflation is many different things. Inflation is also a way that the government tax you without saying they're taxing you.
No, you're spending more money for the items. So you're 6% in West Virginia. Your 6% tax is going to be more on $50 than $40. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's inflation is another tax. So the good news is, hopefully it ends by 2022, the end of 2022.
Time will tell.
Time will tell.
Not very optimistic, but time will tell.
But if not, it eventually works itself out.
Yeah.
I mean, even when we went through, now I don't think you lived through Carter. I lived through Carter.
I was born when Carter was president.
Inflation was high.
Correct.
It was sky high. I think it's actually higher now, or close to as high.
I know that the Fed, there's talks about raising the
interest rate.
Interest rate. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I think you'll see that this year happen. And this is speculation, but I am pretty sure you'll see that happen. I mean, we've used our interest rates to really drive the economy and drive housing. I mean, we still have a housing shortage, just not in Petersburg, Grant County, Moorfield.
It's all over.
It's in the whole country. There's housing shortages everywhere. And so I think they want to keep that low. We're not going to see another housing bust like we did, but in 2008. But I think you're going to see you'll see interest rates start to rise. They're going to try to keep inflation at bay. But there's some things that are just out of our control that we have to just do the best. Be smart, plan ahead, budget.
Yeah,
the hard thing. You make so much, you can only spend so much.
Yeah,
so.
If the government could learn that.
Yeah, they can.
It's not a cash flow problem.
No, we have plenty of cash. It's a spending issue.
It's a spending.
We don't have a money issue. We have a spending issue.
Spending issue. That's most of us.
I think you said your wife has the same thing.
I told my wife that the other day. I'm like, honey.
My wife would say I have that issue.
So don't put you and Teresa on the same Amazon account, or we're all in trouble.
Probably not. I got to place an order this morning. So
okay. Well, thank you for spending time with us. It's our first podcast of Explore. I've reached out to some other people, and we're going to be talking about some good things coming up. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you. Have a great day.
Happy New Year.